Welcome to the wonderful world of dance, bringing you exclusive interviews with top dancers and choreographers and reviews of the world's best companies across the globe. You can find lots more on our website at thewonderfulworldofdance.com.
Hi, this is Savannah Saunders from The Wonderful World of Dance, and I am so excited to be joined today by Iain Webb, the Artistic Director of the Sarasota Ballet and former dancer with the Royal Ballet. Iain has been the Artistic Director of the Sarasota Ballet for, coming into the 17th season, in fact, and the company has recently performed in London's Royal Opera House, which is a return for the UK-born director. Unfortunately, it was a performance that I missed, but I'm so keen to hear how the dancers felt about their experience here in London. So let's welcome Iain and talk about his journey from Yorkshire to Sarasota and the company's upcoming season. Hi, Iain.
Hi, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. You're in this incredible office. I must ask you before we get started about these wonderful works surrounding you. Please tell us everything.
Well, I'm a real bunhead, really, and I never thought I'd ever really get to dance in a major company, but then I fell in love with all the history. And so now, I think when I moved from Yorkshire to London, I had 2 books, and now catalogued there's just over 3,500 books on dance in my library. So plus everything else that, as you can see, from a lot of Sir Fred, Rudy, the White Mask is actually John Cranko's Death Mask, Pavlova's Life Mask, and lots of pictures of who I say is the boss is the big inspiration and really big support. He's like he talks me off the ledge many times, Sir Anthony Dowell. So he's my mentor. I always phone him and ask his advice. So there's obviously stuff around of Anthony.
It looks just absolutely fascinating, and so many books and so much artwork that you've got in history. It must be just wonderful to be surrounded, but also quite an in-depth collection.
Yeah, so it's one of those where, in a way, I'm obviously working all day, and but then when I'm sort of really down or I'm just sort of like need space, I then go into my library at home, and then I'm surrounded with all dance anyhow. So that's where I get my inspiration, or I just get, as I say, it's quite sad, really, isn't it? That it's just ballet non-stop.
No, not sad at all. I'm sure we could all understand your absolute passion and obsession for this incredible art form. Do you have a favorite piece that's around you at the moment?
Well, I would think that in here, I would say obviously the bust of Nureyev's pretty impressive, but I think it's the signed photographs of Sir Fred signed for myself and Margaret and Sir Anthony Dowell. So yeah, there's so much, I can't say. At home, there's some, I guess one of my main ones is I've got a painting that Nijinsky painted himself. So that's quite special, but yeah.
Wow, that does sound very special. Quite the journey from Yorkshire for those listeners around the world. Yorkshire is north of England. It's the most beautiful, picturesque, rolling dales, or as we call it over here, but rolling hills and sheep and gorgeous little towns. I was in fact up in Harrogate for the last 2 days when I was visiting the Yorkshire Ballet seminars, and we were just talking. You've actually had some interactions with the Yorkshire Ballet seminars.
Yeah, I owe an awful lot to the Yorkshire seminars, to David Gale, who founded it, because I went there and I remember the first time going, we was a little church hall. And it was really the first time I'd been in a class where there were other male dancers. Sir David Bintley was there jumping around all over the place. And I, never thought I'd be able to do it. But I just, and it was great because David used to let me go there and take classes. And that's when I fell in love with the Danish ballet, because they had Hans Brenner, who's the great Danish master there. And I'd always been just told, sort of I was 14, thereabouts, and I was just told, go to the back of the class and follow, go to the back and class. And suddenly I did this class with Hans Brenner, and I ended up being at the front of the studio. And I don't know how I got there. It was amazing. It was like almost like a helter-skelter thing. I ran back to do it again. It was so exciting. So that's when the real bug really happened, that I needed to do that. And I've always had a passion because of Hans Brenner.
Oh, what a wonderful story. And this year is actually the Yorkshire Ballet Seminar's 50th anniversary, and they published this incredible book called 25 Summers, which is cataloguing the history. It's a huge, heavy book full of photos, and I'm sure if we look through the pages, and you're going to be in there, so I'm going to have a look through the pages, and I'm sure to see you in a photograph or a memory in there, which is quite exciting. 50 years.
Sure. Yeah.
But you also spent some time with the incredible, prestigious Rambert School of Ballet, and of course at the Royal Ballet School. Take us back to that time in your life. As you said, you grew up in what particularly back in the day was a very rural part of the country, where there are not many other young male boys sort of going into ballet class. Tell us about that time in your life.
Yes, I basically Scarborough, although Scarborough's it's obviously famous for people like the actors like Charles Lawton and people like that, but Christopher Bruce was from there. So it's had quite a bit of a dance connection. And my mother had a school, and she had one boy there who wouldn't go on stage unless there was somebody else. So I got a little bit of extra pocket money. And I was just messing around at the back, and this friend of my mother's, who was an RAD examiner, came in, and she afterwards apparently said, were you watching your son? And I was doing a bit of the old Morecambe and Wise, at the back and taking the mickey, really. And she said, I think he's got some talent. And they went to speak to my father if they could ask me if I would do ballet. And he said, you can ask him, and then was horrified when I said yes. Amazing man. I mean, he eventually, when I moved to London at 16, he had sometimes 4 jobs in order to keep me there, but never for the whole of his life, I don't think he ever told anybody what I did.
Really?
Yeah, but he supported me, but he found it really uncomfortable. So I auditioned, as everybody does in England. You audition for the Royal Ballet School. So I went down with a friend's parents and to do the audition for the Royal Ballet School. And they said, your son is so fabulous. The other boy, meaning me, has no talent whatsoever. But by then, I kind of knew this is what I want. It was something that I could forget everything that was going on outside, and I could it was a whole thing. So I knew I had to do it. I don't know what scale it would be. So then I went to Rambert School of Ballet, which was at the Mercury Theatre in Notting Gate. And I remember the audition, they said, okay, now a double tour. And I was like, what's that? They went, you jump in the air, turn around twice and land again. And I thought, okay. It was great. So I was jumping around all over doing tours. When I went back up home, I was doing tours in the kitchen. Never done one before, but it was like, so then I kind of started there full time. But by then I kind of, as I said, needed to do ballet. And because I'm from the Yorkshire, and I'm kind of like quite stubborn, and if people say no, then I've got to prove them wrong. So I went, so why did I have no talent? I love doing this. So I went back and auditioned again for the Royal Ballet School. And this time they took me in, but I was already too old. So I was already 18. So they said I could only go for 1 year. So I went there, and I just sort of watched the company all the time, and just couldn't get enough of it. And the main teacher there for the company, Terry Westmoreland, he taught the graduate boys and the company, and he wanted me to stay for 1 more year. So I did, but somebody was injured in Sadler's Wells Royal Ballet, so I went out to fill in, and then stayed there, and then eventually got a job. But so I got there by default.
But you actually went from an apprentice all the way up to principal. So that must have been...
I was never a principal.
Oh, you weren't a principal?
No. I think because I was too stroppy. I was a little bit too... no, I was like what they call the first soloist or something. Okay. But I did all the... most of the principal roles. So that's why... but I think it was more a political thing that I never had the title, which I kind of... At the time, used to bother me, but now I'm quite pleased because I'm going, well, I still did everything.
yeah, you did all the principal roles. It doesn't really matter. But an interesting insight into the company of the day, which is, obviously such an esteemed and important piece of the UK dance scene. So it gives us a really nice, interesting insight into what dance life was like back in the day.
Oh, yeah. I mean, back in the day, it was sort of like it's obviously, it still keeps changing now and it has to do. But yeah, I kind of, in a way, in those days, you didn't really sort of like speak so much or associate so much with the principals. You always had respect. It was a bit different with the male ones because when we weren't on tour, we were all in the small dressing room. But with the female principals, you didn't really speak to. But there was, but I broke that mold. I was mad about the most beautiful ballerina there, the main ballerina, Margaret Barbieri. And I used to watch her from the side of the stage. And then I used to get some of the soloists and guys to take her out on tour for dinner. And then I'd join in and just happen to be there and all like this. So eventually, we're almost coming up to our 42nd wedding anniversary next week, I think it is. So in a way, I kind of broke that mold. I was, she's going to hate this, but I was the first toy boy in the ballet world. And there was a lot of politics against it, but people like Dame Ninette de Valois, who founded the Royal Ballet, she loved it. I mean, she always guided Margaret's career, but when we were together, she kind of gave the wink of it. She approved it, and Sir Fred and things. So, so I was kind of always a bit of I suppose, a rebel, or I just, did what I wanted to do, really. So broke the mold.
In true Yorkshire form, and I can say that because my husband is also from Yorkshire, and you share some very similar traits about being very stubborn and very focused on breaking the mold. So it's good to see that this is an enduring trait. But tell me about some of those real magical moments while you were with the Royal Ballet, where you danced for about 7 years. I understand you must have had some incredible moments in the studio and on stage. Share some of those with us, if you look back.
So, I mean, again, I think it applies a little bit to what it's like now running the company, is because I try to make sure that when we're doing ballets, that we try and bring in the people who were associated. So people, when we do Balanchine ballets, people who worked in the company, worked with Mr. Balanchine, because that's one of the things is we would walk into the studio and there would be Madame Dame Ninette de Valois at the front, or Sir Fred and Kenneth Macmillan. They were all there and all part of our family, really. But that amazing history and that to get to work with them was something that the dancers miss. Although it wasn't taken for granted, it was just, really, when I look back, how amazing was it? I mean, to be able to just, I remember, Hans van Maanen, who still looks amazing today. I mean, he's like one of the most coolest choreographers there is in the, and I remember he was coming in. I was very excited to try and, work with him, and we were doing 5 tangos. And this is really early on. And he walked in the studio and I went, oh my God, that's an Armani American flying suit that was specially made by Armani for him. Only one shop, I think, at that time sold Giorgio Armani stuff.
Wow.
And he was like so cool. And he was like, and it was like, it was so all these amazing treasures. But the ballets that we did, and the people that we worked with is, something that we have to keep, that we were very lucky, but we have to try and pass that passion on to the dancers of today. Let them know who they all were,
I'm literally in awe of what must have been an incredible experience. Did you know at the time that it was so special, or was it also just looking back now thinking, wow, like how lucky were the dancers?
No, I think it wasn't. I think it was just that was life. That's how it was. If I can look on it from my son's point of view, so when my son was, born, he'd be with us all the time. He'd be with Margaret all the time, or with me. So when you have, sort of Dame Ninette de Valois, Madam, he just thought she was the most great lady. They had such an amazing response to each other. I remember she used to come to the house, or we'd go to visit her. And so this young little boy was there. And at one point we were there and we were talking to somebody. I can't remember who it was. It was maybe Alexander Grant or something. And Madam started laughing and got uncontrollably laughing. And we were like, panic, what's he done? And she said eventually, get the boy another ice cream, she was saying. And she'd asked him if he liked ballet, and he said he did, and he had a special ballet, and he did a small section of it, which was Rake's Progress, which she choreographed, but he didn't know. So you have that, and then Dame Alicia Markova was very close with us, and again, so he grew up with these people, and it was just, it's Dame Alicia, or it's Madam, or it's Uncle Leslie Edwards. All these people were now when he looks back. And he goes, he had no idea who they were. Matthew Bourne, it was just Matt, and it was all like, and now he's saying he was around these people because it was just natural for us to be around, working with them.
Like, as you say, like one big, happy, loving family. But I'm sure, tell me about being in the studio and preparing for your roles. What were some of your favorite roles that you loved to prepare for?
I think that there was a lot of very special ones. Obviously, with Sir Fred, I think one of the big memories I had was we were in Cambridge, and we used to perform in some of the cities that didn't have big enough theatres. They used to put up a big tent, a big circus tent. And we were there on Jesus Green, and I was doing Colas in La Female Garde for the first time. And I was always, still am, I guess, a bit of a nervous one. And I would be, sort of like, I couldn't get ready early, because if I got ready early, then I had time to think about everything that would go wrong. And there was all this sort of, all a little bit sort of like that. And suddenly we were there, and it's my first Colas, big role, so many props, tricky partnering, everything like that. And they said, we have to get ready really early because Sir Fred, it's his birthday, and the BBC or the TV crews want him to be there with the company to wish him happy birthday. And I was like, freaked out. I was like, and they went, no, don't worry. They said they were brilliant. The management were brilliant. They said, don't worry. What it is he's going to do that quickly, and then there'll be a car waiting for him to take him to the RAF base in Cambridge, and they're flying him up to Scotland to spend his birthday with the Queen Mother. And I went, that makes perfect sense. They're so close, all like this. And at the end of the performance, he came on stage. And I think that's when we connected really more than before, though we'd rehearsed and things. And he'd watched the whole show. Luckily, it had gone well. And so that was an amazing moment. And then again, with him, I think probably the greatest time was a ballet called Valse Noble Sentimentale, which was an old ballet. And Sir Peter Wright had got Sir Fred to come back and sort of revive it. And we were there in the Sadler's Wells in the opera rehearsal room. And it was just Sir Fred at the front, and there was like just a few of us. It wasn't the full cast. And I suddenly saw Margaret at the door. And I thought, well, it was a bit distracting. I don't know why she didn't just come in and, sort of all like this. And just at the end of the rehearsal, Sir Fred came in and he said, can I can I sit with you in the canteen? Can I come and have lunch with you in the canteen? So, well, that's nice. And Margaret was there, and she was a bit sort of like animated. And suddenly she said, "Oh, Sir Fred, I have to tell Iain something, but it's a real big secret. No one's got to know." And it was the fact that she was pregnant.
Wow.
So Sir Fred was the first person to know. So we go back to the studio, and it's the full company, the full cast there. And he was there with his cigarettes, and, because he chain smoked all the time. And he went, "Oh, pop, 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 bend a bit more, and pop, pop, do this." And the company were going, "What did he say?" No, it's fine, don't worry. And then I was wearing pink cut-off tights. And he suddenly got off his chair, and he came up to me, went, "Oh, wearing pink and going to be a father? Oh, I don't think so." And he shuffled back to his seat and just chuckled. And I was bright red, laughing. And the company was going like, "What's going on?" It was like one of those sort of magical moments. And yeah, but there were so many things, with Madame, and just dancing the ballets, a lot of the Ballet Russe ballets that I did, and working with Papa Beresov in Petrushka and things like this. That I was just so lucky, from that person who really didn't think I was ever going to get a job. I mean, I think there was a small company called Ballet Minerva or something. I thought maybe I might make it into that company. Never dreamt that I'd be able to do what I've done so far.
What an incredible, incredible reminiscence of a magical, magical time, and so personal, and such an incredible insight as well to these wonderful characters, and giving us this real sort of glimpse into this lovely relationship that's occurring. It's amazing.
It was a very special.
Yeah, a very, very special time. So what was the point at which you decided that it's time to start thinking about beyond the stage?
Well, I think that with Sadler's Wells Royal Ballet, that's where I did all my dancing things. I mean, sylphides, everything like that. But I'd started to do some of the acting roles. And as I say, I used to be so nervous for everything. But when I was really doing sort of more the acting things, I think Colas was natural for me, because he's just a proper person, the two pigeons, the proper people. So that wasn't so much, but it was more the acting things that I started to feel more comfortable doing. And then they kind of cast me in, they cast me as the prince in Swan Lake. And, I did it. I think it was just that I was the one there at the time, and I did, quite a few shows. But I remember one time just coming off after Act 3 and going to a lovely guy who used to look after me, David Bailey, used to do all my costumes. And I said, I hate doing this. I'm a peasant. I'm not a prince. I don't want to do this. So that kind of made me feel more that I wanted to just go into those. And that's when I moved to Covent Garden and worked with Anthony Dowell to do some of those roles there. So that was when I knew that I kind of, it just wasn't, I'm not a prince. So I found it difficult to do.
Well, there might be others that disagree, but it's interesting that you don't think that weren't a prince at the time. And what was it like working with Anthony Dowell?
Well, he is the greatest British male dancer of all time. There'll be no one like him. And I don't know why, but I have a very special relationship with him. And he was I used to just watch him when I was up in the amphitheatre all the time. When I was at the school, you could sometimes watch class, and I'd watch him, and it was just the most beautiful technique. Everything was just so that I couldn't believe somebody could be that perfect. But then as a person, he just, as I say, he has been my biggest security blanket here. When things were at the beginning very difficult, I would ring him. Even now, when we've just, as you said earlier, the fact that the Sarasota Ballet went to London. So, I went to see him in London, and I said, look, Anthony, I've got a couple of things. First of all, they've just asked me to sign a 10-year contract. So that means if I do the 10 years, I'll be 75. Should I be doing that? And he was like, he made some comment about my age and everything like this. And I said, and then we've been invited by Kevin O'Hare to come and start this celebration of Ashton and bring the company. And, I asked his advice. Should we be bringing it should Sarasota Ballet be coming to London, bringing the Coles to Newcastle sort of thing, bringing it back to Sir Fred's house. And he was amazing. He said, well, I understand what you're saying, but you've just been in New York, so doing Ashton in New York. So how did that go? I said, well, they loved it. They loved Sir Fred over there. And he said, so then you should come here. And he came to the show, and he's been out here to coach the dancers in the Dream. So he's really supported me immensely. I absolutely adore him. He's just the biggest inspiration ever, and so kind and so generous and funny. He's got such an amazing sense of humor. But as I say, again, it's another one of those that I was so thrilled that when he came here, and there was a moment that was so magical that we finished rehearsals and we had the most beautiful dancer, Friedemann Vogel from Stuttgart Ballet, came to dance with us. And we suddenly, all our principals were sat in front of him and asked him questions. And for half an hour, he just talked to the dancers and I was going, this is what it's about. This is one of the greatest dancers in the world. And he's just here in our studio, passing on, and as I say, so supportive, so generous, and lovely. Yeah.
Wow, what an incredible opportunity for the dancers to be able to ask him questions and get his views and advice and insights. As you say, what a magical moment, and to have someone to help guide you over the last 17 seasons. Take me to that point where. Because before you actually took up the directorship at the Sarasota Ballet, you were in Japan, weren't you? With the
So when I was still with the Royal, and what it was at that time, and I kind of started. Basically Margaret and I set up an organisation under Crusade to help dancers with HIV and AIDS. And it was something that I just was so angry about, the prejudice, and so disturbed and upset that we'd lost so many friends or people that we were, with Rudy, who, I didn't know very well, but obviously had been around him, or people like that. But there was nothing really being done. But then we started to do this, the preparations for it. But then it was that thing of it's going to be something that, with both our names and the Royal Ballet, but it's going to be for everybody. And Margaret was amazing because she suddenly said, well, look, I've just read this article on this young boy, and he seems quite interesting. You should contact him and see if he'll come and be part of this. And I said, oh, yeah, what's his name? Oh, it's Matthew Board. So we didn't know him
so well now.
We didn't know him at all. I mean, so I rang him and I met up with Matt, and then we became big friends. We started doing this. And then he asked me to be on his board. And in fact, at one point, the Royal Ballet were on tour in America, and we're in San Francisco, and suddenly Matt said, I think I'm going to come over. So we've got a put-up bed in my room, because he wanted to get away from everybody, because he was studying all about Tchaikovsky before he did Swan Lake. So I was involved with Matt as a board member, introduced him to Adam Cooper, who was my closest friend. Oh. And then he made Swan Lake on him and everything. So now, so that was, I then retired and worked with Matt for 3 years. And then Tetsuya Komakawa, who was a principal with the Royal, he set up his company in Japan, and he asked me if I would go out and look after symphonic variations for a tour of Japan. But it was literally 2.5 months work, and that was it. And I was like, do I stay with Matthew for a year, or do I do that? And in the end, I went to Japan with Teddy, because again, it was Sir Fred, and it was just, and I stayed there 8 years. So we did, like 3 months there, 3 months back in England. So it was, and from there, the dancers themselves started saying, oh, well, when you leave, it's not the same. And then I used to do a lot of galas, like up in Harrogate, where you've just been. And so a lot of the dancers kept saying, oh, if you're doing another project, can we be part of it? Or you should set up your own company and things. So I suddenly was not sure where to move after Japan. Had my job there, but I wanted something else. And I said to Margaret, what do you think? Should I maybe think about being a director? I've never wanted to be. I've always wanted to hide behind and just organize things. And she very subtly said, well, if you don't do it now, you'll be too old. So I started applying.
Your wife can so bluntly.
yeah. So I started applying, and this job came up, and I kind of found myself here.
Well, quite the journey all around the world to get to where you are. And you've been there for such a long time, almost 20 years. I'm sure you'll still be there on your 20th anniversary. Tell me about what it's been like in this new role as the director, taking over the reins of the company, and that experience of stepping into this new role. And what's that like for someone at that point?
Yeah, I think because I never really thought about it long term, that this is what I eventually want to do. So it was sort of like more, again, just sort of like a project based and see. And as I said, I loved working with Matthew behind the scenes and supporting him, and Teddy, and when I did things with Adam Cooper, Johan Coburg and things. So then suddenly you're here. And it was a very different scenario because the company was not in great shape financially or any aspect of it. So it took a lot of work and a lot of hurdles that I didn't think that I would have, ever know how to cross. And the fact that to try and give the dancers things. I mean, when I got here, it was like I even started to pay for physios for the dancers and things like this, because there was none of that. Bought computers so it was quite low scale, low budget, I should say. So, but the thing is that I was like, what is it about the dancing that means a lot? And the most enjoyable thing I had was doing Sir Fred's ballets. So I thought if I could get that across to the dancers and give them that joy of doing his works. And it would be the fact that we'd be in the studio, Margaret and I'd be in the studio passing on and things like this. So I started things like that really, and it was a difficult time, but people around the world were amazing. I mean, the economy hit, there was all the trouble with the economy, like in my third year or my second year, and things like Margaret was still in London. She was still based there, so she didn't move out with me. And I suddenly got a phone call from her. She said, well, I've just been, I forgot where it was, but I've just been with Chris Wheeldon's mum and dad. And they were asking about you. And I was saying how difficult it is. So they got hold of Chris, and Chris has said we can do one of his ballets.
Oh,
so it was all like the amount of friends, Alina Kochikura and Johan Koberg, I paid for them to fly out here. They came and did Giselle for me. No fee, they stayed at the house. Sir Peter Wright gave me the production to do. Just everybody pulled together. And I was able to then start introducing the dancers to a lot of these works. And things like ballets that it couldn't be just about me and my career. It was things like, well, I love this piece of Paul Taylor's. It's amazing. We should try and get, like Brandenburg's. And I approached the Paul Taylor, he was still alive. I approached the company and asked about it. No one had ever done it other than the Paul Taylor company. We did a Matthew Bourne pieces, but it was like just bringing in rep. I remember seeing years ago Wayne Eaglin and Bryony Brind doing Balanchine's Bugaku. I saw it once, but I had something in my mind that I just visually, it was, so I was able to bring that here. So it was really just things of, it was great. One day I came out of my office at home and said, I lock myself in there and get lost. And I came out and I said to Margaret, I said, what do you think of gala performance? And she said, what, Tudors? I said, yeah, she said, well, I've never seen it, but I've heard that it's really great. I said, I think that I'm going to call the trust tomorrow because I think that will be a really good piece. And it just came out of like being in my room and I started looking at books and photographs. I thought, oh, that's an interesting piece. And then looked back to when it was done at Rambert and looked at all that. So I'll tell you a funny story about that because I thought, well, okay, here I am in America. So I rang the Tudor Trust. I spoke to Sally Bliss and I went, oh, hello, I'm Iain Webb, director of the Sarasota Ballet. And then I went, so I kind of feel I have an association with Mr. Tudor because I'm English. I trained at Rambert. I danced with the Royal and now I've moved to America. And she went, yes. I went, oh, that didn't go down very well. So I thought, oh, quick, find something else. And then I said, now, I've got something I want to ask you, but I have a question personally. It's just that I was very close with Dame Alicia Markova, and I remember taking her on Eurostar to Paris when they were making some films of her coaching the Paris Opera. And she started talking about Tudor's Romeo and Juliet and how they were all in Mexico and there was a big meeting in Massy and everybody flew in to look at the designs and she burst into tears and ran out because the sets were all Salvador Dali. So the balcony was the jaws and teeth propped up by bone. And she said she couldn't possibly do Juliet with these teeth there. So I kind of asked her all this information. We started talking and I said, anyhow, what I'd like to do is I'd like the company to do Lilac Garden. Now, we have a beautiful theatre in my building that came from Dunfermline in Scotland, but it's quite small. But Mr. Tudor said to my wife that he always liked Lilac Garden being performed. He preferred it being performed on a smaller stage. Suddenly she goes, and well, who's your wife? So I went, oh, it's Margaret Barbieri. She said, half an hour ago, if you'd have said you're Margaret Barbieri's husband,
should have lived with that.
you could have had the contract signed and sealed by then. So it was like fun things, but always connecting back to England. That sort of feeling.
Oh goodness! What an incredible story. Well, I actually just want to also say, every good man, good woman. It sounds like you're an incredible artistic partnership there. And I'm glad that she eventually moved over to the States with you. Tell me about where you are with the company now. 17th season coming up. What's your current vision for the company? Where's your area of focus? What's important to you now?
I always keep plans and things very close to my heart. So I never let people out. I keep it like kind of locked in. So that nobody just steals those ideas or whatever. But just in case I can't make it, I don't want to commit. So I'm still a little bit like that with things. I think that the DNA of the company, if you like, is respecting and preserving the history, which we do by doing Sir Fred's ballets and Balanchine and things. But we can't be a museum. We can't be a company that's just a museum piece. Although everybody invites us to do Sir Fred's ballets, we do a lot of others. So you've got to look at the choreographers of today. So whether it was, like I said, Paul Taylor and things. So, Jessica Lang, Christopher Wheeldon, all these, so it's relevant today. And then it's very, very important for an artist, for a dancer, to have things choreographed on them. Rather than just being passed on, you've got to have things made on. So like this year, we've got Jessica Lang's doing a world premiere. David Bintley's will be a world premiere. Gemma Bond. So already this season there's 3. So that's really important. But it's then also looking to the future. So again, with choreographers, and also then sort of investing. I think investing is the right word. Investing in the dancers to be able to bring them out and give them those. So a little bit that, Yorkshire chip on my shoulder is that you waited so long to get to do roles because people get, but I try to have, obviously, the principles, and I don't say to a choreographer, you have to use these dancers. They must know, or if the stage in a ballet, I have an idea what I would like. But say, for instance, we're going to be doing now Sir Peter's Wright's Giselle. So Margaret stages it. That was her signature ballet and everything. But we have the dancers, the main principal dancers, but we also try to bring in some of the younger casts whenever we do things. And my thought process is that then the seed's been sown, so they're already getting that. So then when it does become their chance, they can then have that, and it'll come back to them quicker than, and because we as we move along. I remember jumping around a little bit, so sorry about that. But
no, please.
I remember, again, an amazing moment with Margaret, because, again, I know she's my wife, but she was guided her whole career by Dame Ninette de Valois. And when she retired, she was offered a directorship abroad. And the first thing, she spoke to me a little bit, and then she got in the car and drove straight to Madam. And Madam, for the first time ever, was absolutely not. Your job is to stay here and pass on everything that we've given you. You've got it, all like that. So she does that. And, she was like, Dame Alicia, Dame Margot, all these people were so wonderful with Maggie. So now you see her passing that on. So that's all part of it. But again, it's that thing of having something made on you. Having, I don't think I have even a millimeter of choreographic talent. So therefore, I want to see who in the company can, so try and nurture them and give them opportunities. So it's looking at the whole picture of that.
I wanted to ask you about the dancers within your company. For those who may not have seen your company, how would you describe the dancers and those that you look to join your company? What is that special quality that makes them the right dancer for Sarasota?
I think, a question you asked earlier about being a director and everything like this, one of the things I hate beyond belief is when you do auditions. And we go to New York and audition there, we have auditions here. And so we get something like 600 or more people writing in. So then you have to, just on their videos on there, that you have to adjust. And so you invite so many people come. And I'm sat there and we've got, say, 2 hours, an hour and 3/4 or something. And you watch them in class. So how can you judge and have a responsibility of their career? And all these people, you go, if you split it in half, you go, there's 300 people who are unhappy where they are and they want to move on. There's 300 that have just done all this training and they're coming out and they're looking for their first. So I get too bogged down with all this. But you go, so I look and I go, obviously technique, obviously the facilities and technique, but you've got to have artistry. You've got to have that quality. I don't want someone who can just do, all these tricks and stuff and have nothing. Personalities, because again, in a room with a small company, you've got to have the personalities. And I think that's what I also quite like, is that you can't go, it certainly used to be, oh, you're this height. These are the companies you should audition for. So you can't pigeonhole anybody in this company. We have such a mixture, and they come together and they dance as a company. You pull them out and they've got amazing personalities, amazing individuality. So there's a whole mixture. So I kind of try to throw that sort of, pigeonholed procedure out of the window. But it is that factor. So I look for really the quality you can just see. And because of a lot of the Ashton ballets we do, and there was no real schooling, there was no real training, everything was from all over. So now with the Ashton rep and the style, we have like a platform that we can build. So we look, oh yeah, they'll be, and it's fairly obvious, but it's that passion, it's that artistry that so often is missed. And yes, they have to do the technique and things, but I look for that, and commitment. And I think that's what makes the company unique.
And what do you, seeing the different types of dancers, you mentioned the 300 who are just finished their intense training and they're looking to start their careers in professional companies, as well as those wanting to move around. But what do you see as some of the real challenges that this next generation of dancers are facing, or how they need to adapt for this world in which they're sort of starting out in?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, everything about, how it was when we were there, the way it was all done and the hierarchy and all that, everything like this is all changing and has to change and everything like this. But the thing is that it's, especially in America, where it's unheard of. There isn't one company that's 52 weeks employed. Even New York City Ballet is 40 something, but they're not the full thing. So there's a lot of time when they're laid off, or the seasons are like ours is a minimum of 33 weeks. So you've got all that to do. You've got this, the fact is nowadays they've got to be able to adapt to do so many different styles. I would never survive in a company like this because I was a bit of a stiffardo. I was like trying to do all the modern things and things. So they've got to be able to be more versatile than we were. But I worry because I feel that your career, you train for so long, and your careers are short. But I'm finding that the dancers are stopping much earlier. And I think they're thinking of, well, okay, now what am I going to do after I retire? Well, I better start. And they're great because they're doing university courses, they're doing all this as well as dancing and everything. But then they're tending to stop earlier. So I worry about that they, good for them. But as far as, you just get to that point where you're a bit more mature and you can bring that bit more to, and then they don't do that, or they fall. But it's a most amazing profession. I mean, it's just tremendous, but it's really hard.
Yeah,
and it's a really hard life. And I understand that, but I kind of, I think, oh, they've got so much they could still do, but they want to think of. But generally, I think people just, hang the point shoes up far too early.
Well, there is something about seeing a dancer who is at their physical and artistic sort of apex, but also the maturity as well. And I love seeing dancers in this moment because they have this incredible confidence and this incredible natural, their bodies just move so naturally. It's so effortless. And they bring such it's my favorite. My favorite is when I see a dancer who's into their mature sort of part of their career, because it is this beautiful combination that you don't get when you're a bit younger, because you just haven't lived enough life, perhaps, maybe, don't know.
It's right, but again, it's also, when you think about it, there aren't that many sort of like narrative works being made where something like that can come to fruition, where you've got like, oh, you need that. So, and again, we have a great guy, Ricky Bertoni, and he's from England actually. So Ricky is a character principal, and again over here, you don't really have categories for that, but it's really important. And it's important for the young dancers to see and respect that, because otherwise, again, so many ballets have been lost anyhow. But if you don't have those individuals, if you don't have those, we're never going to be able to do. So more ballets will be lost if you've not got that maturity, those people who can carry and know how to act and know how to show and are not embarrassed about showing emotion. I think that's the thing. And
to pass that on to the next generation, as you say. So it's so important. And have you thought about, you mentioned right at the beginning, this extra, do you stay longer, and you've got 3 years to your 20th. What's next for you and your wife and your family there? But what are you thinking about now or in the future? And I know you like to keep your cards close to your chest. You don't want to raise expectations and say it's running. But, or is there just more you want to do with the company at the moment, and more work, more choreographers? Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more works we want to do and look into, and, sort of great choreographers, Mark Morris and people like that, who, we've done one piece of Mark's, Edward Liang, who's just become director of Washington Ballet, a most amazing person, amazing. So there are people like that, Radmansky, people who we want to do. I quite often, and sometimes I find it difficult being the director here, that some of the dancers don't come and talk to me the same as I get more phone calls and from other dancers in other companies asking advice. Well, what should I do? So sometimes my dancers don't do that because I guess I'm the director, but I'm giving all this advice out. I think you should do this. Or even with, some of the choreographers or directors, I try to advise or be there for myself. Useless. I've never thought anything other than, I hope I wake up in the morning sort of thing. I don't plan for, I do it on, and I do it on a whim. I do it because something inside says that's what I should do. So when I came here, and when we did in 2014, we did an Ashton celebration. And I did it purely from my heart. it was an anniversary, and I just wanted to do this, and I wanted to do over 5 days, all these different performances, 4 days, all these different performances, do lectures, talks, all like this. And I just needed to do it. It could have gone terribly wrong. It could have been really damaging for the company. And I did get scared at one point, or I realized what I'd done. It wasn't scared. I realized what I'd done was when there was a message saying, Mr. Bonning's been trying to get hold of you. And I went, I only know Richard Bonning, the conductor who was married to Joan Sutherland. I don't know anybody else. And suddenly he flew in from Switzerland to watch 4 days of Ashton. You're going like, so, but it was that thing of I just had to do it. When Johan Koberg and we produced Out of Denmark at the Queen Elizabeth Hall, I did it because of the passion. I just did it because I wanted to be a vehicle for him and committed. So, but for myself, I don't plan, we just, go back into that den of yours with all of your dance history and dance books, and wait for the inspiration and passion to come to you like a lightning bolt.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I have to ask you as a final question that I do love to ask, particularly because you've got that story of the young boy from up north. But it's a universal story, isn't it? About the young dancer from the rural sort of, edges of any major city or town around the world, and coming into this incredible art form, this incredible dance world. But what advice would you give to the young dancers, the young boys who are perhaps in those rural towns and listening to this and thinking, well, maybe one day I can also grace those stages?
I think when you get that you need to do something, that you have to do, is just believe in yourself. Believe in yourself and always remember why you're doing it. And you're doing it because you love it. You're doing it because you really enjoy it, and it's a way of releasing. And just focus on that. But when I say focus on that, but be very open to everything around you. Learn and watch and watch and watch. I mean, I did, in a way, very little training. I was up there in the amphitheatre watching all the time. There was the lady called Doreen Ruth, who was a big ballet fan, and she used to buy me tickets every night to go and do all that. But if you just be true to yourself, and as I say, just really, really go, and always remember you do it because you love it and you enjoy it. And don't be frightened. Don't be frightened what other people say. Just be really, really strong in yourself. That's life.
Well, that's wonderful advice from a stubborn, focused, passionate, incredible, and now the artistic director of Sarasota Ballet. Thank you so much, Iain, for those wonderful, wonderful stories while you're surrounded by incredible history that we are seeing. For those who can't see the video, because of course you're listening on the podcast, please have a look at the YouTube, because you will see these incredible paintings, the sculptures, the figurines that we talked about in the beginning. And it's absolutely worth just flicking up and having a look at. So thank you so much. I also just want to say, don't forget, of course, to grab your tickets for the 24-25 season that's coming up. Go to their website, the company's website, quite simply, sarasotaballet.org, and of course, follow the company on Instagram. Thank you so much, Iain.
Thank you. Good to see you. Thank you.
Don't forget to subscribe. We've got some incredible interviews coming up with principal ballerinas and renowned choreographers. We love dance and ballet, and we hope you'll love us. Join us on Facebook and Twitter.